It began not with a flame, but with a book. The year is 1486. The setting, a cell in the Rhine Valley. A disgraced Dominican friar named Heinrich Kramer is fueling his resentment into ink. He has been expelled by local bishops for his obsessive and irrational investigations into women. But Kramer is about to find his vengeance. This is the Hammer of Witches. It would become the most destructive manual in human history. Over the next 3 centuries, it would help transform a scattered pagan superstition into a crimen acceptum, an exceptional crime. A crime so dark that the laws of man, of evidence, and of mercy no longer applied. To understand the hysteria, one must understand the logic of the Malleus. Kramer didn't just hate witches, he codified a specific lethal distrust of the female body. He engaged in a grim linguistic surgery. He claimed the word femina, woman, derived from phi and minus. Femina equals phi, faith, plus minus, less. To Kramer, women were lesser in faith by their very nature. They were, in his view, intellectually slippery and physically insatiable. Before this book, magic was often handled by the church as a minor sin of delusion. After the Malleus, it became a conspiracy. It was no longer about a neighbor curdling milk, it was about a secret army of the devil, threatening the very fabric of Christendom. Because the crime was hidden, the Malleus argued that traditional legal protections were a hindrance. Hearsay became evidence. Torture became a requirement. Imagine the sensory assault of a trial. The noise is a deafening wall of accusations. The heat of the torches singes the air. Here, the truth was found through the body. First, the pricking. Professional witch finders searched the skin for the Stigma Diaboli, the devil's mark. They believed the devil touched his followers, leaving a spot that could neither feel pain nor bleed. If a needle disappeared into a mole or a scar and the woman did not scream, the verdict was sealed. Then the swimming test. This was the judicium aquae. The logic was a cruel, closed loop. Water, as a pure element used in baptism, would reject those who had renounced their faith. If you sank, you were innocent, perhaps to be pulled out in time, perhaps not. If you floated, the water had rejected you. You were a witch. In the eyes of the law, you were already dead. But why now? Why for 300 years? History is rarely about evil in a vacuum. It is about pressure. Europe was caught in the grip of the Little Ice Age. For decades, the summers vanished. Crops failed, livestock died in the mud, the Great Hunger took the young and the old. People were desperate for a why. The data tells a story far different from the myths of midwives or healers. The actual victims were overwhelmingly the socially redundant. 80% were women. Most were over the age of 50. Many were widows or the impoverished. In a world of dwindling resources, these women were seen as a burden. Historians call it the curse of the refused gift. Imagine a poor woman begging for a cup of milk from a neighbor. The neighbor refuses out of his own scarcity, then feels a pang of guilt. Later that day, his cow falls ill. To ease his guilt, he transforms his selfishness into her malice. He doesn't say, "I was greedy." He says, "She cursed me." By the late 17th century, the fever began to break. It wasn't just that people became kinder, it's that the legal system became more rigorous. Judges began to realize that a confession extracted through the rack and the thumbscrew was not a revelation. It was simply the sound of a human being saying anything to make the pain stop. The scientific revolution demanded empirical proof, something spectral evidence could never provide. The final toll? Not the millions claimed by later Victorian fiction, but a staggering 40,000 to 60,000 lives, mostly in the fragmented territories of the Holy Roman Empire, where central authority was weak and fear was a local currency. The witch hunts remind us that when a society is squeezed by environmental collapse and economic fear, it will always look for a face to put on its misery. And if it cannot find a villain, it will draft a law to create one. The hammer of witches eventually stopped falling, but the anvil of human suspicion remains.